So we made a gunmetal skull spider, and he's going to sit on top of my head for this entire review, hopefully. I don't have a reason for doing this, but I'm doing it. So what's this review? We're actually taking a look at Bionicle 2016, specifically one set, because I've never owned it before today. This is actually the first time I've ever held it in hand, and yeah, it's, let's just spoil it. So it is Lava Beast, and I actually picked this up, honestly overpaid for it, but I did it specifically for a video like this because I knew it was kind of a unique opportunity, at least for me. How does a Bionicle Generation 2 set hold up in 2024, especially when you've never owned it before? I'm not nostalgic for this set. The only thing I remember about this is seeing it in a Toys R Us back in 2016 and going, no, I'm walking past. And that was with myself being super excited, super hyped for Wave 1 and Wave 2 of Bionicle. I was not actually one of the people that was let down by the Skull Villain Wave. It's not perfect by any means, but I enjoyed it for the most part. It was definitely different, even if you want to consider it as being generic. However, this set, I don't know, man. The Lava Beasts 2016 in general leaves a lot to be desired, I'm going to be honest, and this is no different. I will say at the very least, the black and orange swords are great. You get 4 of them here, which is very generous. Probably the most of any of these swords to appear in any single set, whatever the color may be. And with that said, you also get arguably the best of the beast masks, if only because black is a neutral color, so it's much easier to work with this one than the other two, which are dark purple and trans neon green, and then dark blue and trans neon green respectively. And it's... I've already talked about dual colored masks. I've talked about consistency with Generation 2 Bionicle in general, and I stand by it. These guys are weird. In terms of the build here, there's actually not a lot to be impressed by, to be honest. I mean, it definitely does some things different. For one thing, building up the bottom leg, but is there a reason to do that? It's 3 pieces, and if you did that with regular CCBS bones and sockets, or bones and armor pieces, I guess, you'd be roughly at about 2 or 3 pieces anyway. So I don't think it really adds to the set, but I mean, the dark orange is fine, and it means you get more of those Glatorian neck pieces in that color. So sure, whatever, that's fine. It's something different at the very least. It changes things up. I wouldn't argue it does it for the better. The arms, same kind of thing, just kind of built up, but normal for the most part. Where they change is at the hands, of course, where you attach these sort of wing scissors. I don't really know what to call these, and the function is definitely clunky, but it's at least a function, and it gives you a kind of interesting motif at the very least, so I'm not going to complain about it too much. The dark gray in the fingers does stick out to me a little bit, but it's not as awful as I expected it to be, and it kind of goes with the dark gray in the legs here, so sure, I can see it. And the fingers, of course, do move, at least the top 2, having hinges at the knuckle, and also being on pins, meaning that you can actually twist them as well, which is nice. The thumb doesn't move at all, but it's more than plenty of movement to work with at the very least. And of course, you have a joint at the wrist, a joint at the elbow, I guess, and a joint at the shoulder. The arms are a little bit short on the character, but the entire character is kind of short, so they end up looking long in relation to it, and especially because those hands are technically enormous. But the legs are teeny tiny, which makes this character feel or look very top heavy. He's not actually. He's fairly lightweight because it's a pretty empty structure overall. The friction adders are not completely necessary, but they do add a little bit of height there, and that's very likely why LEGO did it. Or sneakily, they did it to increase the parts count, because that is not something that LEGO is always above, and especially with Generation 2 Bionicle, they kind of did that a lot, but I'll talk about that in a separate video. With all that being said, though, the neck is kind of where things get a little bit interesting, because it is double jointed to be able to attach this shadow trap half, and you only get half. And that bothers me, because it means if you bought this set, you're not getting a shadow trap out of this at all. And I mean, they very easily could have thrown one more just in the set if they wanted to. They could have made a weapon out of it or thrown it somewhere on. I mean, they could have come up with a way to add it to the back here, maybe close something off so you get a set, and that way you have an extra shadow trap. Is it necessary? No, but when you're paying $15 for it and it comes with 1 but not 2, it starts to feel like maybe it is necessary. The mask, as I mentioned, is definitely an interesting piece, and it is atop a trans neon green head, which is cool in theory. I understand what they were going for, but it does mean it's a half mask. It does not cover the entire head, and that is a little bit bothersome. Plus, the eyes do not line up with the eyes of the head at all. It's a very weird thing to do, especially this early on in a wave for Bionicle sets. If you're going to do that, why not just make a new head? The Borak did brand new heads because their head was an entire function and build. And you could have done something with this here. Is it bad? No. It gets the point across with few pieces. Does it add anything to the set, though? I would argue no. And you do get the jaw thing here, which I think nobody's really a huge fan of, but at least it's an admittedly interestingly shaped piece. And thankfully, very thankfully, the axle holes do go all the way through it, meaning you could connect something to the bottom half too, and I'll take that at least. No, one of the most interesting things about this set is actually these, not because they're trans black or trans brown, whatever you want to call that color now, but because they're a single piece when they don't need to be. See, here's the thing. LEGO already had a shell add-on, this piece right here, which I'm using on top of this head build, but this piece already existed back here, back in like 2015, 2014, I think even. I'm pretty sure because I know I got it in Brain Text. That would have been in 2013 too. And that crystalline structure from this actually better matches the crystalline structure of the helmet and mask and the jaw here. So these are much larger and they're a single piece with one connection only. There's no bar holes anywhere in this. Why bother then? It means spending, I mean, for LEGO, for one thing, like $10,000 on a mold. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but it's expensive to make molds for pieces. And so to have seen them do something like that for something that's designed for one purpose, I've already talked about the problem with the torso armor from the Uniter sets. And this has that same problem. Maybe it's a little bit better here only because A, this is a smaller piece overall, so it is technically easier to use. It's a crystalline structure in a crystalline color, which ends up helping. And being that it is a crystal, it is organic, I guess, or geometric at the very least, right? In a very different, it's natural in its aesthetic. And I think that that works out well enough. In terms of the other function here, you do have the sideways waist movement, which is just kind of added on to give it something extra. The extra sound in there is horrendous and not asked for, but that is a material problem. That's not for the purpose of this video. In terms of other unique pieces, you get the lava printing on the torso, which is admittedly pretty cool, and it does match, or at least harken back to some other CCBS prints that we've seen in Hero Factory, so cool, I'll take it, right? So what are my thoughts on this guy? If it's not obvious already, I don't think I like it. I mean, there's aspects of it that I think are really interesting, and there's actually even like a good figure in here somewhere, but the problem ends up being the whole. Like, everything together. I will say, for what it's worth, I don't have the other beasts on hand right now, but looking at them, this might be my favorite of the three. That could change, for sure. I do appreciate at the very least that it's not an over-reliance on a color outside of its native color scheme, being trans orange in this case, instead of the trans neon green. And I understand that that was supposed to be like a corruption color, whatever, right? That's fine. I just think it's a very flawed idea in general, and it does mean pieces that are much harder to use on the other figures, like the dark purple and trans neon green mask, as I mentioned before. On top of that, in terms of what you actually get out of the figure, it's fairly hollow on the back, which is kind of annoying, even for the Bionicle standards, even for CCBS standards in general, which we're kind of seeing a lot of backs that are pretty bare. This is definitely amongst the worst. And honestly, I think LEGO even could have given us a gearbox up top. Not saying that they should have, but could have. And it wouldn't have changed much about this. It would have only improved it, in my opinion. Even adding a little bit more dark gray to go with the other dark grays in the set as well. So, I don't know. The last thing I want to mention too before ending the video, and that's talking about the sideways function here, which was actually introduced, I'm not doing that. It was actually introduced in the Uniter sets, but the reason I've never been a fan of side-to-side motion in sets in general, the Rakshi, the Matoran from 2003, Makuta, Vaki, etc. But at the very least, when they did it, it was around the time frame that LEGO was still using masks that were designed to be knocked off from any contact, right? From any angle. And what's really nice about that, in fact, I can kind of show it because I've got my little monkey guy here, my little combination model. But what's really nice about it is that the fact that these masks are designed to be hit from basically any point to knock the mask off is a huge point about how this works. The problem I have with the Generation 2 mask gimmick is it feels like they knew what they wanted as the end result, but they didn't know how to cause it. You know, it's got this whole eye gimmick instead where you have to hit the eyes from the back, but because it's behind the character and typically kids are going to hold it like this, it's very hard to hit that eye stalk, you know? It's all the way back here, protected often by the mask itself. And so instead, you're relying on hitting a mask that each time you hit it is just being pushed into the head. But that's how it connects. So you're not loosening the mask at all when you do this. Whereas doing that to something like this Mahiki here, over time, that's going to wear, the mask off. And that wasn't even a strong tap. It was just because it's on a ball joint. So yeah, you kind of see my problem here, right? All right, so suffice to say, side-to-side motion is not nearly as good. Really, the upward and downward swinging weapons weren't that great at removing masks either, but at the very least, many of the weapons were designed with kind of a hook shape to them to grab onto the mask, because LEGO very clearly realized this after molding the piece. It was nice as a thought, at the very least, to have masks that could be knocked off, but the execution was not the greatest, so the side-to-side motion just doesn't really help in any of that. So, all things considered, knowing what I know now, these sets are worth a little bit more money. Unfortunately, though, granted, thankfully, they have been going down in price here recently, which is good to see, and hopefully that trend continues. I've seen a lot of sets where checking on them a year ago and checking on them today, they've reduced by about half, which is crazy to think about. But at the end of the day, it's kind of all a bubble if you really think about it anyway. With all of that said, though, if I were walking down the aisles in Walmart today and I saw this for $15, would I buy it? I guess technically with inflation, it'd be probably closer to 20 or whatever, but I still don't know that I would. This is probably the one I'd be most tempted to buy, if only because of the weapons and the mask being reasonably useful. I don't really care about this mask personally, but at the very least, you can kind of see this as being like an homage to the Poison How, and in that it can have some novelty, sure. But would I buy it? Obviously, I did buy it, but that was for this video. Would I do it again? No, I don't think so. Here's the thing, too. I already have a Quake Beast on the way. That's not because I bought it separately. I actually got it in a lot. So I bought the lot for, honestly, I overpaid. But that was mostly because of the condition of some of the sets being chewed on and drawn on, which was not shown in pictures, but hey, buyer beware, right? With all of that said, though, at the very least, the seller's been pretty cooperative and has been helpful for the most part. So we'll see, and hopefully that continues. Fingers crossed. That said, though, still overpaid for this for the video, and even looking back at it, if I saw this on eBay, let's say, for $15, yes, at that point, I'd probably buy it only because I know that obviously it's worth more, and worst case scenario, if I had to sell it, I could sell it for 20 or 30 or whatever. Not saying that that's why I'd want to buy it, because no, but I have been in that position before. All of that said, though, it's an easy pass, in my opinion. You get two masks, neither of them, like, it's a cool shape for a mask. I think it'd be a lot more fun to use without the head, honestly. Using it on something else, maybe even building a dedicated head for it, would admittedly be pretty fun. On its own, it actually doesn't even look half bad. Like, the horns and stuff, honestly, aren't super necessary. It looks evil, you know, like truly evil. It'd be a great mask for a different project, which maybe I'll mess around with it for that. But with all of that being said, that's going to be it for this video. So if you enjoyed the video with me and my little friend up here, then yeah, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, because it does help out the channel. Maybe if you subscribe, I'll put him somewhere else in one of the other videos, and you can tell me where he's hiding. I don't know. But of course, you can always check out the comments, or you can check out Discord, Instagram, or Patreon if you want to support the channel, get some perks, and help me get out of bankruptcy. I'm just kidding. All right, that's all in the description. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.